single dream. I lay each one down at your feet. Every moment of my wandering never changes what you see. I've tried to win this war, I confess. My hands are weary, I need your rest. Mighty warrior, king of the fight. No matter what I face, you're by my side. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. Truth is, you know what tomorrow brings. There's not a day ahead you have not seen. So in all things be my life and breath. I want what you want, Lord, and nothing less. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. I will trust in you. You are my strength and comfort. You are my steady hand. You are my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Your ways are always higher. Your plans are always good. There's not a place where I know you've not already stood. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. I will trust in you. I will trust in you. I will trust in you.
Good morning, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to our September 6th recording. We're going to zoom in one more time on the book of Philippians. And we've been talking about 9 characteristics of Christians in the church that the world desperately needs to see in these days of pandemic. And so this morning, again, if you have your Bibles open, go to the book of Philippians chapter 4, but also Psalm chapter 13. The psalmist cries out 4 times in simultaneous order, "How long, O Lord? How long? How long, O Lord? How long do I have to wear this face mask and breathe in all this carbon monoxide? How long, O Lord, do I have to socially distance myself from other people? How long, O Lord, do I, Dave Coxon, have to climb up on a platform on Sunday morning and preach an outdoor message, which I've been enjoying doing thoroughly? How long, O Lord, do I have to wash my hands for 20 seconds after I go to the restroom? Hopefully that's one that we do anyway, right? But we ask that question. How long is a question of longing and hope. And that's the question of the psalmist. That's also our question in the pandemic. By the way, do you know where we get contentment from? It's manufactured somewhere. Anybody here know where you manufacture contentment? That's right. It's at the satisfactory. At the satisfactory. And so here we are. You know what? We're 6 months into this pandemic, and we're longing to get back to normal. And people are getting sick, and they are dying. But the question that we're asking is, how long, oh Lord, how long? A while back, I read an interview with David Kessler. Now, he's considered the world's foremost authority on grief. He co-wrote the textbook on the 5 stages of grief. According to Kessler, as a nation, we're experiencing collective grief. This pandemic has altered life for every one of us, and it's important to acknowledge what we're feeling. There's a loss of normalcy, a fear of economic toll, loss of connection. We're grieving. Every one of us experiencing one of those stages of grief. Now, these stages are not linear. We don't necessarily experience all of them, but we often move back and forth between the stages. So let me remind you about these stages and see if any one of these resonate with you today. First of all, there's denial. This is when you've heard yourself say, it won't happen to me. I won't get sick. I won't get the coronavirus. In fact, some people even said, I'm not even sure there is a virus, or I'm not sure it's worse than the common flu. A couple weeks ago, I went to the hospital to visit a patient. Few and far between visit to Sharon Regional, and I passed the temp test and the interrogation in the first station there, and then the next step was to pass through security and be granted admittance. The request to get in took a call to the patient's room, but just before I stepped up to the security desk, an elderly black male was seeking permission to visit, I guess, a friend or a relative, and for some reason his admission to the hospital was delayed, and to his definite dismay, he stepped aside to wait for me. And so I stepped up, and then I overheard him say as he stepped away, let's see if they let you in. And so instead of going to the waiting room where they assigned this guy, he was resigned to watch me go through the process. Now, part of me was thinking, look, please, I mean, I'm okay waiting. You take care of this gentleman first. Because I can tell he was a little bit upset. And like, they did let me in. And I could feel for the guy because we're both in the middle of this pandemic. And I've been angry more than one time about things. And I could see where he was coming from. So the second stage of grieving is anger. If you have older children in your home, maybe you've heard this. You're making me stay home and you're taking away my activities and my friends. And so there's anger. There's also bargaining. You know, you say things like, man, I've social distanced and nothing's happened to me. And look, I've followed all the instructions. I've worn the mask for the past 6 months. So can I please resume life as normal? And then there's sadness. We say, you know, with the psalmist, how long? How long, O Lord? I don't know when this thing will end. I mean, what if I never see my grandmother again? What if I don't get my job back? What if that trip of a lifetime that we plan never comes to be? What if we never get to take it? And so that's the fourth stage of grieving. It's sadness. And so the fifth stage is acceptance. And I think this is what's happening now. We began to realize that there is absolutely nothing that we can do about this pandemic. I'm not powerless because I have a choice. And instead of just acceptance for the Christian, I think the choice is contentment. The choice is contentment. In 5, then 4, then in 3, then in 2, then in 1. And so the fifth stage is acceptance. And I think this is what's happening right now. We realize there's nothing we can do about the pandemic, the circumstances that we find ourselves in. But it doesn't mean that I am without choice. I have a choice. And I believe the choice beyond acceptance for a Christian, the choice is contentment. The choice is contentment. So there's another disease And I really think that probably anybody who's listening out there, or if you were in your car listening on the radio, or if you were in a church service, you would suffer from this other disease. Its symptoms are pretty generic, but let me tell you, it's in our blood. I hate to tell you that, but it's in our blood. And so I'm going to give you some symptoms of this disease, and I want to see how it resonates with you. All right, here's the first symptom. The first symptom, if you're a man, you might find yourself walking into your garage looking at an automobile that maybe you've been paying on for 2 or 3 years, and you're thinking to yourself, I wonder what this baby get me in a trade. And you just want to trade it away and get a new one. Or if you're a woman, you might walk into your clothes closet, and I shouldn't be so gender specific here. A man or a woman, you walk in your clothes closet, and by the way, I said into, because you don't just walk up to it anymore. You walk into your clothes closet, and you're looking around, you're surrounded by clothes, but you say, I don't have anything to wear, or I don't have anything that matches this blouse or this shirt. Or maybe if you're just a person that you're concerned with how you look, so you're looking in the mirror regularly, and you look at yourself and you're not happy with what you see. You're thinking, man, why do I have to have my father's nose? Or how did I get saddled with my mother's hips? And so we've all been there. And then this is the person that looks at someone else's spouse and begins to question why they married their spouse. Man, could they have not got a better deal? And I really believe that this disease is what's solely responsible for much of the divorce that's taken place in our country, and likely for a lot of the people that are in debt, which is most of us. And so if you find yourself in one of those categories with one of those symptoms or more of them, then the disease is called discontentment. And I think it is a pandemic in our society today. And we try to medicate it. We self-medicate it. Americans, they buy over $1 billion of prescription drugs every year, not to mention over-the-counter drugs. Or sometimes, if that doesn't work, we're going to turn to drugs and alcohol, or sex, or pornography, or the internet, or food, or shopping, or something else to kind of take our minds off of the current situation. People are doing that left and right today. And so as we zoom in one more time on the book of Philippians, and we look at the church at Philippi, Paul wouldn't be writing this letter today if they weren't suffering with this disease too. The disease is discontentment. And I wonder if there's a cure or not. You see those people where they were looking at the Romans, their neighbors. Some of them were Romans, but they were looking and their eyes were roaming, Their eyes were a Roman. And so is there a cure to this disease? I think the answer to that is yes. I think there is a secret to pandemic or no pandemic to being content and to finding contentment in our lives. And so look at Philippians chapter 4 and listen to what Paul writes. I'm going to begin there with verse 12. Paul writes these words. He says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content. I'm just going to stop there. Let's repeat that. It's worth repeating. I've learned the secret of being content. And so look at it this way. Contentment is a learned thing. That's the first observation I make today. Is it's a secret, but secrets are made to be known, right? But it's a learned thing. But it doesn't come, in other words, it doesn't come natural to us. It's not by our nature as human beings to be content with life. It's more by our nature to be discontent. In fact, the first thing that we learn as babies isn't how to laugh or especially how to speak. First thing we learn is how to cry. And everybody loves a contented baby. I could hold a contented baby in my arms every day if a baby's happy with life and teething on their pacifier and they're sleeping easy. Oh, I could hold that cuddly baby all day long. But, contented babies are great, but contented babies don't stay contented for long, do they? New longings come along, many of which go unfulfilled, and even for the youngest of human beings, the desire to explore the world quickly becomes a desire to have the world. And yet the Bible speaks of this thing called contentment as if it's something we could reach for and grab. And the Apostle Paul talked about it time and again in his ministry. He wrote, I'm content with weakness. I'm content in hardship. I'm content in persecution. I'm content in famine. I'm content when I'm mistreated and insulted and all those things. And we're looking at that saying, how, Paul? What's the secret of your contentment? And so perhaps if we can understand how Paul could learn contentment in his situation, maybe you and I could learn a little bit of contentment in our situations as well. So here's what we have to learn in order to be content in any and every circumstance. What I want to give you today is 4 lessons on contentment. 4 lessons on contentment. All right, lesson 1 in learning the secret of contentment is this: rejoice in the Lord. Remember last week it was our key verse, Philippians chapter 4, verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say rejoice. And if you skip down about 6 more verses to verse 10, Paul says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord. So the first lesson to finding contentment or learning the secret of contentment in your life is going to be to rejoice in the Lord. A missionary returned from the island of Tobago, where she had been working among a leper colony. And on the night prior to her return to the United States, she gathered the assembly of the leper together. And that sounds pretty good, the assembly of the leper. They came together for a worship service. And at one point in the service, she asked if anybody had any favorite songs. And a fingerless hand raised in the air from the back row. And here it was a woman who not only had just a stub and no fingers, but she also had no nose. As a matter of fact, her lips were completely gone. But the song this woman requested was Count Your Many Blessings. Name them one by one. Man, wow. I mean, whatever your situation, Paul says you got to put on some joy here. You got to be content in your situation. If you look at verse 10 again, he says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you've renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you've been concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. And then I think it's very interesting what Paul says in verse 11. He says, and I'm not saying this because I am in need. And so I want to look at Paul and say, well, Paul, yes, you are. I mean, you are in need, dude. I mean, look at your life. You know, you're living in a prison, even though you're under house arrest. Basically, you got to pay for the house, and so you need money. And Paul, not only that, you need food to eat. You need clothes to wear. You need some of the basic things there. And Paul, you may need just a little bit of freedom, a little of justice, because you're being held a prisoner and they've got no charges on you whatsoever. In fact, you need the satisfaction of knowing that you're protected there, because the Roman guard could come in at any point in time and haul you away and execute you. Paul, you need comfort. You need peace of mind, you know? And yet he doesn't think of himself as someone who needs anything. And I think it's because Paul learned not just the secret of being content, but he learned not to compare his situation in his life with the situation or the lives of other people. Because nothing robs us of our contentment more than comparing ourselves with other people. So that's lesson number 1. Now, here's lesson number 2, and it's very similar. Okay, so the second lesson in learning to be content is resist comparing yourself to other people. The Apostle Paul tells us in the book of 1 Corinthians, don't compare yourself to other people. It's not wise to do so. I remember 2 years ago in the summertime, someone gave me 2 tickets to go see the Cleveland Indians club seating at Progressive Field. I was generous enough to invite my wife to go along. And we went together, and man, did they roll out the red carpet. I mean, seriously, they even give you name badges. And then they take you to your seat. Not only that, but they take you to the clubhouse. And in the clubhouse, there is a buffet. You can have all you can eat. And then you can sit around. You can watch the pregame show or the entire ball game if you choose on big screen TVs. And then from there, you can walk out into the ballpark area where you're seated, and there's vendors selling food all around, except guess what? It's absolutely free. And so you could stock up and eat all you want up until about the bottom of the seventh. Then they take all the food away. Too bad, right? Well, I ate my fill by then, and let me tell you, I had a great time, even though the Indians lost that game. And so let's fast forward into the future. Last year, Chuck Thompson and I, we had the opportunity to go see the Indians play the Buccos, the Pirates, one night, and it was raining, and they should have called the game off. But instead, we go, and I think we had to wipe off our seats with towels from the paper towels from the men's restroom like 3 times. Instead of being undercover like I was with the club seating, we were right out there in the open. And so we were getting soaked. 4 rain delays in 4 hours that game took, and they didn't call the game either. So there we go. I find myself down in the men's restroom for about an hour and a half of that non-game, studying my sermon anyway. And I'm thinking to myself, I'd really love to have a stadium dog and a Coke and some peanuts right about now, but I don't really want to stand in that long line and still get wet, and then on top of that have to eat it in the restroom, you know? So about that point in time, I was really envying those folks in the club seating area. And I was thinking, oh man, if I could at least be in the club seating area, I'd have all the food I wanted to eat, and I could watch the game on TV, and yeah, I wouldn't have to get wet, and oh, poor, pitiful me. In Muncie, Indiana, and Ball State University, they did a study of working women in the Muncie, Indiana area, and they came to find out that there were many women who didn't need to work and didn't want to work, but they were still working. And so they surveyed these women to find out why they didn't really want to work and didn't need to work, but they were still working anyway. And what they found out was these women were working simply because they wanted to make money so they could afford things that other people could afford. And that was the reason why they were working, even though it was kind of against their need and their wishes. And so, you know, when we compare, one thing we do quite frequently, at least I know I do, is we compare up. We usually compare up. We seldom compare down, because if we compare down, we would be comparing ourselves to people who were less fortunate than we are, and just maybe we might feel a little bit of gratitude if we did that. We might even be thankful for the wonderful things that God has blessed us with. But usually we compare up. We compare to the next level. We're always comparing the person on the level ahead of us. It's kind of like if you're in a hotel with an ocean view, and, well, you've only got a view on the 8th floor. You're thinking the person on the 9th floor might have a much better ocean view or ocean front. But we're like that. We always, the problem you see with comparing ourselves, though, with people, is there's always someone out there who has more than we do. So we keep on comparing ourselves to others, and it just keeps getting more and more discouraging. And the more discouraged we are, the more discontent we seem to be. So the Apostle Paul says this. He says, I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or living in want. And now Paul's speaking to us here as someone who's lived on both sides of the tracks. He knows what it's like to have plenty. He grew up as a Roman citizen in probably a pretty nice home, pretty well-to-do home, because he went to this nice elite school. But then again, now he's under house arrest. He's living in a medium-sized house. Not too bad, not too shabby. But on the other hand, he's been in a dungeon before. He's been abandoned. He's been on the run. He's been shipwrecked and been on an island. He's been all these places that you and I would never have to see. Poor Paul. But he's seen both sides, and he's been through some tough times. And he just wants to be clear of this fact. You may have a lot, you may have a little. But that's not really what contentment's all about, because if you have a little now and you're not content, you're certainly not going to be content later when you have a lot. Because where you are now, that's where you'll be later in that condition or position. And if you think that getting a lot is going to make you content, it won't. In fact, if you're not content now with your little, then you're certainly going to be more discontent than ever later with your lot, okay? In other words, the old saying goes true. The more we have, the more we want, until we end up wanting even more than we can have. So if you're looking for material things to satisfy the need, the empty spot in your little heart, then you're never going to be content. It doesn't matter if you have a lot or if you have a little. And so that's lesson 2. Lesson 1 is we need to rejoice in the Lord. Lesson number 2 is we need to resist comparing ourselves to other people. And then lesson number 3. And so, friends, lesson number 3 is this: recognize what doesn't bring contentment. Because if material possessions could bring us contentment here in the United States, we would be the most content and happy people on the face of this planet. They did a survey some time ago, maybe 10 years ago or so, of the populace of the United States, and they discovered that 76% of all poor households had air conditioning. 76% of all poor households had air conditioning. Now, that is over against the survey taken in the mid-70s, where they discovered that only 36% of all poor households in America actually had air conditioning. Now, that same survey discovered that the average house built in 1975 was like about 1,600 square foot. The average house built today is just under 2,600 square feet. The same survey discovered that 97% of all poor households in America have a color television set. And on top of that, another 78% of the poor households surveyed had a DVD or a Blu-ray player, and another 62% of those households also have cable or satellite television. So, we're really hurting badly in this country. If we could find contentment in material things, then we would be the most content people on the face of the earth. When I visited third world countries, which I've done on a few occasions, what I thought I'd discover was people in misery. I thought I would find that people were miserable living in their situation, their condition. Because I thought to myself, well, you know what? If you don't have pizza and you don't have air conditioning, preferably at the same time, how could you possibly be happy? Right? I mean, if you don't have a warm shower or a hot shower, you couldn't possibly be content with life, could you? But what I found was this. It didn't matter whether you were in the dumps of Haiti or the slums of Cairo, Egypt. People there didn't seem to be struggling with discontentment at all. In fact, studies have shown that depression and discontentment are almost non-existent in non-westernized cultures. And so you got to ask yourself the question, will material things really help me escape the cycle of discontentment? See, Christianity offers all of us discontented people living in an unsatisfying world something wonderful, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. But C.S. Lewis once wrote this. He said, "We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with sex and drink and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us. We're just far too easily pleased in this life. And so when we know Jesus, nothing in the world can take that satisfaction away from us, because it's fixed on something eternal and something immovable. So friends, where does contentment really come? Where is it really found? Paul's going to give that answer to us in lesson number 4. All right, folks, lesson number 4 is realize that contentment comes in knowing Christ and serving Him. Contentment comes in knowing Christ and serving Him. What do we know about Jesus? Well, we know that He left heaven, that He became one of us, that He lived a sinless life, and that He died a substitutional death on our behalf, and He forgave our sins. But far, far beyond, far more than just forgiving our sins, Jesus became one of us. And so what's important here is that we understand the gift of Jesus, the lasting satisfaction that we have through Jesus Christ, who said these words, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." And so the book of Hebrews expounds on the idea of His presence when the writer tells us that we should be content with what we have, for He has said, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Now, I had never noticed before the coupling of those two ideas. He says, be content with what you have, because I'm all you need. All right, we don't need all of these other things. We don't need good circumstances or anything else to be happy, to be content. What we need is Jesus. When we have Jesus, we have all that we need. And so Paul puts it this way. If you look at our key verse today in Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, we all know this. "I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength," or through Christ who strengthens me. And so Paul's learned that contentment is not found in anything here in this world, but it's found in the inner strength that comes from having a relationship with Jesus Christ. He's the only one who can truly satisfy. And so perhaps you know this, but during COVID-19, a lot of people have had to go it alone. What I mean by that is how many people here had no loved ones who are in nursing homes, who are separated from their children or grandchildren, or how many of you know someone who's had major surgery. Like, for instance, we knew a lady who's 10 years younger than we are who had open heart surgery. Throughout the entire procedure, in 13 days in recovery and rehab, she could never be with a family member, not one visit. She had to Skype or Zoom or what have you to be with them, which is second best thing, but not quite having someone there to hold your hand. And so, speaking of which, there's a story about this man who was having open heart surgery during COVID-19, and he was scared, obviously, and he said this. He said this: "On the morning of the surgery, a nurse came into my room. She took hold of my hand and she told me to feel it and hold it. Now," she said, "during the surgery, you will be disconnected from your heart, and you will be kept alive only by virtue of certain machines. And when your heart is finally restored and the operation is over and you're recovering, you will eventually awaken in the recovery room. But you will be immobile for as long as 6 hours. You may be unable to move or speak or even open your eyes, but you will be perfectly conscious, and you will hear and you will know everything that's going on around you. During those 6 hours, I will be at your side, and I will hold your hand exactly as I am doing now, and I will stay with you until you are fully recovered. When you feel my hand, you will know that I will not leave you." And the man said, "It went exactly as the nurse told me. I awoke and I could do nothing. but I could feel the nurse's hand in my hand, and that made all of the difference. So this pandemic may keep us apart, but through it all, I pray that you felt the hand of Christ holding yours. And through it all comes our call to come alongside of one another. You know what? God does his greatest work through you and through me. And so contentment is something that can be practiced. It can be practiced. So who here is going to hold out the hand of compassion to someone? Because that'll bring contentment, and that'll demonstrate you have contentment. Who here is going to hold out the hand of generosity? And so we have to understand that contentment is not a spectator sport. Contentment means that we don't sit back and we watch others in the game. We get in the game and we play the game. And in that process, we become more and more contented as life goes on. And that's the way it should be. We should be becoming more and more discontented with this world, but more and more contented with our relationship with Jesus Christ. And so contentment comes in knowing Christ and in serving him. And so by the same token, as we prepare for an invitation this morning, someone said we ought to be the most discontent people on the face of the earth as Christians. And I agree with that as well, because we're not content with this place being our home. It's kind of like this. How many of you enjoy going to a hotel, maybe with your family, maybe just to get away to get some R&R, or maybe you just passageway between place to place and you need to spend the night somewhere, so a hotel is convenient, right? It's better than spending the night in a dormitory or out in the, well, some of you like camping. I realize that. I'm just not, I'm not much of a camper, a happy camper. But anyway, if you do enjoy the Holiday Inn, here's the thing: you appreciate the wonderful accommodations. You don't want to be in a hotel room like my family stayed in one time, where the door jammed and we couldn't get out of the room, or the same hotel where our yogurt had curdled at the bottom, and in the very same hotel I pulled the towel rack off of the wall as me in a sleep cheap, right? But you want good accommodations. The hotel you're staying at, you expect them. But here's the thing: you don't. You may enjoy a night stay or two or a week in a hotel, but you wouldn't want to make it your home. I mean, you really wouldn't. Some people had to do that. If you have catastrophe strike your own home, you might have to live in a hotel for 3 months. Or if you travel excessively on the road, you get sick of staying in hotels. It's temporary, right? It's only meant to be one room or sometimes a couple of rooms, and that's it. You wouldn't want to live there. And the same is true of this earth, of this world. We're not of this world. And so we need to be eternally conscious of that. And that, I believe, is where the secret of contentment really lies. So how are we going to be more content? We're going to rejoice in the Lord more. We're going to resist comparing ourselves to other people. We're going to recognize what doesn't bring contentment. And lastly, we're going to realize that contentment it comes from knowing Christ and serving him. So get in the game and practice contentment. The Apostle Paul said this of this world: we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the series out of the book of Philippians. We can go back and do a quick review. We know that as we zoom in on the church at Philippi, they had 9 quality characteristics that the people around them were observing in the church. And those same qualities can be observed in us today. And the first thing is we need connectivity in the body of Christ. We need to show the world that we are united and one. Secondly, as Paul said, to live is Christ, to die is gain. And so we need purpose of life moving forward. We want to have the minds of Christ, and that's where humility comes in. We want to be like Christ, who emptied himself, made himself nothing. We want to shine like stars in the universe. and we want to draw people's attention to the cross and to Christ and the resurrection and not to ourselves. We want to be servants like Timothy and Epaphroditus were, and demonstrate Paul's words in action. And then, finally, we want to press on towards that goal to win the prize for which God has called us heavenward in Christ Jesus. We want to be goal towards eternity kind of people. And then we talked about having joy, the joy of the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say it, rejoice. And then finally and lastly, we want to be contented people. As living on this journey, we're not home. We're looking forward to the day when Jesus comes back to take us back to be with him. And so those are the 9 quality characteristics of the book of Philippians. I hope, again, you've enjoyed this series, and God bless you and love you. Until next week, till we meet again, friends.